Hey there. Good evening. This is George Orwell week here at Pod and Deliver, and today is Animal Farm. George Orwell wrote this book in 1946, and this is one of the latter books that he wrote in his career because he passed away in 1950. And Ruben, this book is a book where it's been done a couple times in film, and we're going to review that later on in the week. But this book is obviously, he called it a fairy story, right? And he definitely let people know that he was talking about the Soviet Union, and he was very critical of the Soviet Union. So when you read this book, you're like, oh, the characters that are brought up in the story, you say, oh, I see who this is. I see that Napoleon is Stalin, and I see that Snowball is Trotsky, right? And so forth. And as the story goes on, you see this animal. Well, what I should go back and share that this story takes place on a farm, right? And the animals could talk, and they learn how to read, and they basically get fed up with Jones, who is the lead farmer, right? The head farmer of the manor. And they kick him out because he treats them terribly, like the Tsar did, right, in Russia. Kicks him out, and he's out, and they basically manage this farm, these animals, and it's everyone's equal, right? And they have these rules that say everyone's equal. All animals are equal. Four legs good, two legs bad, and they have a number of them, including like no alcohol, right? And so they go on and they manage this farm, and the pigs take power, like Stalin and his people. And so you see how things go awry as the pigs get more power and start changing the rules. And so, Ruben, what struck me with this book is not obviously the historical piece. I love this book because it's visual. They're animals, but you know what he's doing here. And some of the lines he has are tongue in cheek, and he's such a great writer. And so what struck me though is that he was able to do this. He was able to talk about the Soviet Union without saying the Soviet Union. And I think what struck me was the way the devices he used as he's telling the story. And so, which makes me actually share this book with my students every year, my government students, because of how it deals with communism. How about you, Ruben? What struck you with Animal Farm?
Yes, well, you can read it as an inspiration of the old Soviet Union and get something out of that, or not. Meaning you can really draw a lot out of it even without that knowledge, because you see that this is the kind of the default for a lot of governments. If you think about when you give power to somebody and you do it and you trust too much. Actually, what I thought about as I read it this time was the French Revolution. In that,
Oh, wow.
you take away the power from the king, Old Man Jones. King Louis maybe is the Old Man Jones, and then you give it to these new guys, Robespierre, and the next thing you know, they're sleeping in bed and they're taking the milk.
Right.
And so the thing is that you question everybody, and this is I've never seen it more difficult to do that than the era we're living in. To question your own, you can't. People are too dogmatic.
Right.
You only question the other guy. So I appreciate it. I do like the history about it, the Stalin reference, and I mean, not in the book, but the fable of it. Yeah, but I do want to also mention the power, having just discussed 1984, the power of propaganda. And you have this song, Beasts of England, where this is how Napoleon and Snowball get the animals on their side,
right,
is through this song. I mean, there's something really deep about that, because this is similar to how 1984 opened with the 2-minute hate, is you get them emotionally riled up, then you have them. And I've taught this before as well. It's been years, but what I did was, now in the book, I know you haven't asked me yet about how I teach it, but just because it's going to we'll talk about how to teach this, but
Sure.
I'm talking about the power of propaganda. I did in the book it talks about how it's set to the tune of La Cucaracha.
Yeah.
I think My Darling Clementine.
Hmm.
So I've sang the song with the students, and we've sang it together, and as part of getting them kind of more interested and remember the book more. But the discussion on propaganda is definitely worthwhile and definitely hit me hard in looking at this book another time, or this time around, I should say.
Can I add something to that, Ruben, what you just shared? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. Even towards the end of the book, where Napoleon at times is kind of losing a little power, the animals are starting to question. And you know what he says? More parades, more festivities. Give them that, and that'll kind of quiet them down. And basically do a fake out, right? Like, just have them think about this over here when over here I'm dealing with actual adults. Because one of the things that you don't do is deal with human beings, and that's what Napoleon started doing at the end of the book. And so, yeah, I mean, just to go along with what you shared, that's just I don't want to say it's smart politics, but it's smart if you want to keep your people down, right? And Stalin was great at doing that, right? How about teaching, Ruben? For me, I usually do this when I share this film and the book during the time where I'm talking about communism in American government. So when I look at comparative governments, um, when I look at republics, when I look at different type of oligarchies, I'll go ahead and talk about communism, and I'll say, hey, let's watch the film or read the book, and we've done both over the years. And I'm able to share, and I don't even have to say too much. I'll ask questions. It's a really good book to ask questions like, what do we see here? How do you feel about the rules? How do you feel about the pigs taking power and living in the house and changing the rules? And then the kids are able to share that and be able to give their input. And so it's just a great book to when you're dealing with topics like communism. We're looking at ideologies like that, and looking at how it might look great on paper because everyone's equal, but then when you start putting in practice, we've never seen it in practice work. We never see it working.
But what exactly do you do? Meaning,
yeah. So what I do is we have a conversation regarding regarding communism. I obviously have some questions that
first of all, how do you read it? Do you just give them all books?
Yeah, we'll give them. It's a very, as you know, Ruben, it's a very small book, so we read it together, and usually after I'm sorry, not a paragraph, but after a chapter or two, usually a couple chapters, we'll review what we read, and then I'll have some text-dependent questions on that just to start up the conversation, and then always with the idea of, this is American government. We're going to be talking about this ideology of communism, and so because sometimes they can't tell you what communism is, but if you say, no, now I've read it, I've seen it, now I could maybe communicate it better. So that's how I do it in class. How about yourself? How do you go ahead?
Yeah, I think for me, I might break them up into two groups or more. I mean, I guess you could also look at it as 4 separate groups, but maybe two groups look at one side, which I would maybe call socialism, and the other side maybe I would call the free market. And the reason I say that is because I feel like that's really where the argument is centered. After I read this book and I've talked to teachers, it seems that this is really what we're talking about here. And I want to briefly, I wrote a quick quote in the beginning of the book. The animal's perspective is this: man is the only creature that consumes without producing. He does not give milk. He does not lay eggs. Yet he is Lord of all the animals. Now you can kind of transfer that quote to a worker, to a union worker. Certainly turn of the century, a frustrated worker who's saying, wait a minute, why do the goods and why does the production and all the labor fall on us, but all the the results, the yield, go to just this small group? The argument. And so to me, the way I would look at it, I think there's 2 things you could do with this. And I know a lot of people say, well, why are you making it such a simple little thing like just this versus that? because it tends to gravitate, it tends to
Sure.
go in this direction. And I would either do straight up, two teachers go at it. You could do one exercise where somebody takes on that side and then kind of models the free market versus the socialism, or just have two sides really give it a go at it, really fight for socialism on one side and social ideas, and the other side go to free markets. Because, and I will say this, there is an inherent unfairness in both sides. If you
Right.
think about it, there's always going to be an inequality.
Mm.
And I lean on free markets and that kind of thing. However, no matter what happens, think about Napoleon, and no matter what, even if you gave the chickens the milk and Molly the horse the milk, because there was an inequality, like the top pig, people who haven't read the book, the pigs were at the top and they were starting to gather all the good stuff.
Mm.
Even if they distribute it to those chickens, there's still going to be chickens. There's an inequality there.
Yeah.
The pigs are going to rule. So
and we see that in the free market. You're right. And I think for Ruben,
what do you do about those inequalities? Yeah.
I have a friend who teaches this, because when you brought it up, how you would separate it with socialism and more economic. So I have had friends who've taught it. One particular I know teaches it in economics, and because that makes sense, because you're saying, hey, this is how the free market works, and this is how socialism works. And like you shared, Ruben, neither is perfect, and we've never seen it work perfectly anywhere. But yeah, definitely there's things you could do with it. And how about, but as an English teacher, what would you do? Would you just read it as a piece of literature and then discuss it, or how would you do it?
You can't just read it as a piece of literature. It's impossible. You have to bring up the politics. You have to bring up the politics. There's no way around it. And you have to bring up economics. I don't have any problem doing that. At times that comes up with other things, but I would also bring up the concept of a fable. A fable is a story that usually centers around animals, and talk about that. Maybe so if you're just talking pure English, maybe compare it to another fable. There's a poem titled Fable, I think by Emerson, that's pretty cool to read, and maybe explore some of those concepts, different ways of telling a story that is communicating a message, especially one as important as Orwell's.
Maybe you have the kids do that, right? Maybe they could write a little fable. Or I recently had my kids do a story, like Cinderella, right? That has a message, that has something they can pull out. Yeah, very good.
Right. So, yeah.
Well, Ruben, anything else before we close it up?
I think I covered
pretty good. Yes, you did.
That's it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us again this evening. And we'll be back with George Orwell's Week. And have a good night. Bye-bye.